Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the inverted pyramid structure for news writing in journalism. But the joke is that you can choose other forms, other shapes. However, the inverted pyramid seems to work best for our purposes. So let's begin with the basic concepts of newsworthiness. Why is news reported? We feel that people need to know something. We call it news. We gather information as journalists, we summarize it, and we present it in a packaged form that saves our audiences a lot of time. Otherwise, if they were to go from source to source and learn about every single piece of that story, it would take them maybe 10 times longer than if they just skimmed through a news article and said, oh, this is good, this is interesting, I want to know more about this, and then they can read further, or just a summary. What happened, when, where, why, and how. So journalists collect that information fairly and accurately. We will talk some more about those criteria: fairness, accuracy, and presenting that story in a very simple, accessible format to the audiences. We found that the inverted pyramid is the best way to go about that. How is news reported? The most important part of the story is the so what. How is it affecting us? How is it affecting the audiences? These are the questions we want to ask. So that's where we actually begin. We start with the end, the most important part, the outcome, the so what, the way the story ends. And then from the most important part, we go down to a little less important, a little detail, but not as essential as the breaking news part. And then the third portion of the information would be general information and other details that you may or may not want to know. You don't have to know. So what we call a lead, L-E-D-E, or L-E-A-D, a lead, not to confuse with lead, contains the most important information: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So those important questions to ask: who did what, when, where, and why. And finally, the last one, how. That includes a little bit of detail, but not as unimportant as to be placed in the second part of the story, which is the details. So let's see. Let's suppose the city police department reports an accident occurred at 2:30 a.m. overnight. At night we say a.m., but it's actually night. So here's what information police would provide to the press. A car driven by Joe White, 29 years old, hit a curb on Main Street, smashed into a tree, and overturned. Police say White was speeding and lost control of his car. He was hospitalized with minor injuries. A passenger in White's car was killed. The passenger was Amanda Smith, 22 years old. Pronounced dead at 2:45 a.m., so basically 15 minutes after the crash, which would be on the scene. We are conducting toxicology tests to determine if alcohol was involved, Police Chief Jack Russell said. Interesting, Jack Russell, right? It's a dog breed. So if we put this information in the form of an inverted pyramid, we would say, what's the most important outcome? One person has died, and we know the detail. It's a woman who died. This fact is more important than the accident itself, because the nature of the death, the nature of the accident, is secondary, where the primary information is one woman was killed. When? 2:30 a.m. Where? On Main Street. And note that it says 2:30 because this is the accident time, but when she died was 2:45. Maybe she was struggling for her life. Maybe she was in a coma, or in her last moments. We don't go that much into detail. We just say at 2:30. So why did she die? The driver, Joe White, was speeding and lost control of his vehicle. And how? The car hit a curb, smashed into a tree, and overturned. The next part would be the source of the information. Where did the information come from? How do we know this? It is very important in order to evaluate the credibility. All of the information has to be tied directly to the source where it came from, the police. So we attribute this story to the police and say police reported or police say that such and such thing happened. So that is called an attribution. So if we put it all together in a lead, we will say a 22-year-old passenger, which is the what, was killed early today when, after a car hit a curb, crashed into a tree, and overturned how? On Main Street, where? So what is killed? When is earlier today? And then we will give more detail to be more precise at what time. But if it's on this calendar day, we can say today. So inverted pyramid style writing would look like this. According to the city police department, the driver, Joe White, 29, was speeding and lost control of his car, causing the death of Amanda White. So this is why it happened and who was the source. We mentioned the police as the source. So this would be our second paragraph. We said the first paragraph would be called a lead that includes who, what, when, where, why. And the second paragraph gives more detail. The last part would be even more detail. White was hospitalized for minor injuries. This is the additional provided fact. And then we're conducting toxicology tests to determine if alcohol was involved. Police Chief Jack Russell says, this includes a quote from the source. So we say police chief, that's the attribution. Jack Russell is the name. And using a quote gives it a first-hand appeal, gives the credibility of bringing up a verbatim quote. So further in this class, we will learn that quotes need to be written down verbatim in quotation marks with all the precise detail, even if the person has a dialect or says something incorrectly, grammatically incorrectly, that is fine. We still use it in quotation marks, attributing that to the actual source. So here's the whole story. A 22-year-old passenger was killed early today after a car hit a curb, crashed into a tree, and overturned on Main Street. According to the city police department, the driver, Joe White, 29, was speeding and lost control of his car, causing the death of Amanda White. Why the news happened and who was the source is here. And we don't say killing because killing would mean intentional. Causing the death is that inadvertently it was an accident. So by choosing the right word, you're avoiding putting guilt, accusation on the person. In this case, Joe White. White was hospitalized for minor injuries. So this is the additional fact, and we're conducting toxicology tests to determine if alcohol was involved, Police Chief Jack Russell said. That's a quote from the source. So this is the inverted pyramid style. So we will have fun with this geometric shape and maybe others. I don't know about that. But the linked exercise, it is not for a grade because our syllabus clearly states that we only get grades for the stories, and each of our stories is 15% of our grade. So I'll go over that more. We have meetings scheduled, so that information will be discussed, and I'll take your questions. But for now, this was our second presentation, second lecture titled The Inverted Pyramid, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.